This is part two of Evil Spirits of Arrested Development by Worley. Arrested development is one of the largest areas of attack on the soul through learning disabilities. This powerful spirit and his helpers are able to destroy in body, soul, and spirit. The mind, will, and emotions are particularly vulnerable to attack. It is estimated that fully 10% to 15% or more of all public school children have a learning disability. These children grow up chronologically, but their ability to learn does not. This is not their intelligence, which is generally average or above, but their learning ability drags behind. In learning, there are various roadblocks for young and old alike. This includes poor hearing and visual perception, also motivational and mental retardation. Some occur even when none of these are involved, yet learning is blocked, and a learning disability may have taken root. A learning disability has been defined as a disorder in which an individual's brain handles information in a way that blocks learning. The arresting process usually begins in childhood and shows up by school age. These children mature physically, but their learning abilities will be stagnated and remain on a childhood level. In other words, they will be unable to keep learning and building upon past years of education and experience. Although they may grow up physically, emotionally, and partially in mind to be adults, they will still not progress at a normal rate of learning. The seven areas of cognitive development that may be impaired are oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, reading comprehension, math calculation, and mathematical reasoning ability. Arrested learning areas are only scratching the surface of this widespreading cancer. Learning disabilities are not usually a single disorder. Those who have problems with the three R's will usually have difficulties with motion, spatial relationships, memory, communication, impulsivity, and attention span. Experts in this field have categorized each separate area of learning disabilities. This research can be used to seek out and identify the various areas that demons control. Next, we need to explore the alleged causes and see how these relate to what we have learned through deliverance. Dyslexia is the most common disability. Dyspoor or inadequate learning or mastery of lexia verbal language. Dyscalculia, problems with mathematics. Dysgraphia, written language, grammar, spelling, and ability to write legibly. Dyslexia is categorized by extreme difficulty in learning and remembering letters, written or spoken words, and individual letter sounds, i.e., sounds B for D, saw for was. Long after normal children outgrow these learning pitfalls, older children and even adults plagued by dyslexia spirits will still have these recurring problems. Other symptoms include illegible handwriting, mirror vision, confusion between left and right, lack of preference for using one hand over the other, confusion about differentiating concepts such as up and down, yesterday and tomorrow, and bizarre spelling errors associated with this area. No two dyslexics will experience exactly the same problems. Just because a person has some of the symptoms does not necessarily mean that he or she is dyslexic. Another stronghold which learning disabilities and dyslexia foster is in the frustration and discouragement caused by consistent failure. Often he cannot call up the words he wants to say in front of a group. Embarrassment and other socially binding spirits enter at this time. Because of the importance placed on school and their written or spoken failures in it, children grow up feeling they are stupid. Unfortunately, this is reinforced by their peers. Fear motivates their concealing problems because of fear of failure, rejection, and of being treated differently. Many adults have spent a lifetime covering up their learning deficits. Often, they avoid promotions for fear they cannot manage increased responsibilities, and fear that someone discover their secret. They go to great lengths to conceal the fact that they cannot read, write, or spell, or that they do it very poorly and with difficulty. Though those with learning disabilities generally score very high in puzzles, problem solving, and intelligence tests, they tend to have poor marks for written or spoken verbal expression. Dyslexics comprehend stories well, and many even acquire an excellent spoken vocabulary. The demonic handicap keeps them in bondage, and usually their handwriting is atrocious. Males make up 80% of the dyslexics. The enemy works to destroy men because they are destined to be the heads of homes and churches in God's chain of command. By keeping leaders inferior to others, especially women, they will feel inadequate, unprepared, and unable to lead. This will cause them to retreat from the battle. There is a real control exercised by arrested development physically, mentally, and in social circles. Because of an educational system which is reading oriented, dyslexia has received more attention than other learning problems. Cases of dyslexia alone without associated difficulties are very rare. Dyscalculia is another learning process broken down through learning disabilities. The demonic family of dyscalculia contains spirits which cause poor memory when working with more than one number at a time. There is difficulty in writing legible numbers and columns of numbers drift to the left or right. Additional problems occur in logic, mathematical operation, and word problems. Troubles with mathematics are not very irregular because it is another language. Another learning disability is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD, and affects attention problems. These spirits will keep victims from focusing on a single task or concentrating for extended period. One tactic this spirit uses to attack is by hindering the screening out of distracting information while concentrating on another subject. For example, while focusing on a subject pleasing and profitable to the Lord, and profitable, they will bombard with many useless thoughts, words, or activities on going around them. An individual with ADHD often cannot finish a project. They may not appear to be listening or will interrupt frequently. Known for their hot tempers and aggressive behaviors, two-thirds of those who have it carry it over into adulthood. Growth and development of the person is arrested. This area might be the root of the other learning disorders because every aspect of learning requires attention and concentration. The last area of learning disabilities causes spatial motor and other perceptual deficits. Those affected have difficulty judging their bodies in relation to space and cause them to seem clumsy and accident prone. Evil spirits working here include poor muscle coordination and balance, accident prone, stuttering, depth perception, dominant peripheral vision, dormant fovea vision, etc. They cause difficulty holding pencils or scissors, and many have difficulty judging distances. To them, a fly ball hit into the outfield may be closer than it seems. A swing may seem too fast to mount, and moving vehicles look closer than they actually are. To this individual, sudden movement is especially threatening. As children and adults, they will be teased as sissies or wimps for being so cautious, but they really just perceive the world differently. Evil spirits work in the physical realm and interfere with social skills and behavior. They torment in the soulish realm as well. These demons keep the individual from fitting in. They will cause him to interrupt, talk loudly, or embarrass himself. He will not understand how to make friends. These very same demons do give the individual enough insight to make him aware of how others view his behavior. This is to strengthen the feelings of the outcast and feeds rejection. This area is similar to the other four learning disabilities. Dyslexia will cause trouble decoding words. These demons cause the individual to have trouble picking up on social cues, such as body language and facial expressions. The spirit of the outcast will move in. Doctors believe that emotional problems resulting from abnormal communication, feelings of inadequacy, and separation and outcast causes loss of self-esteem. This can be overwhelming for a child, especially when rejection becomes the primary disability carried into adulthood. This emphasizes the importance of getting to the roots of this demonic stronghold. It holds some keys to freeing many walking or wounded to whom we minister. These rejections, rooted in failures and inadequacies of their childhood, leaves hurts and scars with serious side effects. The entire rejection kingdom may have arrested development lurking at its roots. Descriptive diagnosis of learning disabilities by experts sometimes exposes the legal grounds used by demons to operate. Specialists in the field freely admit they really do not know exactly what causes learning disabilities. They believe problems result from a combination of biological and environmental influences stemming from various origins which are hard to pinpoint. Severe head injuries and infections such as meningitis are sometimes involved. Genetic factors play a part, and heavy documentation points to the family line. To the deliverance worker, this indicates family curses and ancestral sins. Premature and low birth weight babies may be particularly vulnerable because of the circumstances surrounding their birth. The dysfunction may not become apparent until school age, and usually by then, scarring has already taken place. Now they will carry this burden for the rest of their lives or until they receive deliverance. As these children get older, they will be hit with extreme anger and frustration and often fall into depression. All of this contributes to emotional upheavals. Some of the difficulties are not lifelong, but are mere development delays that may disappear, becoming less obvious as a child matures. The, there are many other causes as well. We must arm ourselves to do battle with these enemies. Variations and arrangements of brain cells are cited as a cause. Acquired word blindness in adults and congenital origination as existing from birth is believed to originate in the left hemisphere of the brain, which is known as the language center. Some doctors feel defects on chromosome number 15 cause learning disabilities. Biological and genetics mismatches are medical theories attempting to explain the inherited relationships of this illness. The cerebral cortex is responsible for controlled motor functions, sensory, perception, speech, memory, and emotions, essentially all the complex learning responses. Man's brain is divided into left and right hemispheres. Normally, the left hemisphere is larger than the right, and they work in unison, performing their responsibilities simultaneously. In dyslexics, the right hemisphere is equal in size or larger than the left. Though unproven, the mixed dominance theory states that when this happens, the right robs from the important functions of the left side. With a better understanding of the psychological, we can direct our attack on specific demons causing the symptoms in body, soul, and spirit. A high proportion of learning disabled people are left handed, and lefties are predominantly controlled by the right hemisphere. Some physical symptoms which track back to this include lead poisoning, poor diet, and lack of sleep linked to neurological problems. Inadequate or ineffective neurotransmitters also hinder concentration and attention by causing subtly undetectable dullness. People with dyslexia are better at recognizing letters in their peripheral field of vision instead of a central field of vision. There is an interaction between fovea and peripheral vision that degrades the ability to read. Dyslexics have fixed masking where normal readers have the best resolution of letters. Normally, the dominant fovea vision picks up the words and letters on center. However, a dyslexic has stronger peripheral vision which focuses on the beginning and ending letters of a word, making them clearer and dominant. This explains some switching of letters which takes place when a dyslexic reads aloud, causing much confusion. Learning problems are complicated by serious organizational problems. Evil spirits controlling organization or management of a life can be devastating to any live-in relationship, such as roommates or marriages. These people are often messy, never on time, and unable to bear their part of household or financial responsibilities. This can put such an emotional strain on a relationship that often the individual gives up. Repeated decisions and promises to change fail because of the massive control of arrested development. The devil fragments, tears, and binds your soul with ungodly soul ties. There is also another hidden line of attack. He works to arrest the development of your soul, mind, will, emotions, so that you will remain in a little girl or little boy stage. Although normally the growth of mind, will, and emotions will be placed to physical development, it can also be slowed down or stopped at a certain age. My own emotions ceased to develop properly when I was only 5. This was the result of my realization of how completely my father was rejecting me. It is possible for growth to be arrested in one area and not in another. Physically, it seems that evil spirits often work through affecting the pituitary gland and growth hormones. There are demons called stunted growth and midget, which are particularly stubborn and difficult to remove. Because of its critical nature, the pituitary gland seems to be a favorite target for demonic activity. Spirits of arrested development may cause one to have or to keep a very youthful appearance, even when normal aging should occur. Our youth crazed society drives people to seek to look young at all costs. There is another spirit called premature aging, which has the opposite effect, as his name indicates. Those with this spirit look much older than their years. Other things pave the way for entrance of the arrested development spirits. Some of these are severe trauma, abuse, incest, molestation, loneliness, fear, severe rejection, rebellion, and lack of discipline. Control spirits operating through the parents can hinder a child's normal growth and maturity if they determine not to allow him to grow up. Sometimes fears that the child will make a mistake can make them overprotective. Others feel that their own age will be exposed when the child matures. Arrested development promotes the stupid philosophy and vanity that somehow it is wrong to feel our chronological age. It would seem that growing old gracefully is strictly a thing of the past. Like modesty, though old fashioned and rare, aging gracefully is still very attractive. Lack of proper, consistent, and balanced scriptural discipline can also be a door through which arrested development enters our lives. False love will block the adult from his or her responsibility to be an adult and rear the child. Children do not need a buddy, they need a mature and loving parent. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction will drive it far from him. Proverbs 22:15. He that spareth the rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes or early. Proverbs 13:24. Human emotions are a primary focus of attack. When spirits manifest, they can produce childishness and immaturity. Childish attributes include strong willed, defiance, rebellion, temper tantrums, always wanting his own way, childish self will, irresponsibility, fearful, jealous, foolishness. Proverbs 22:15. Instability, be no more children, tossed to and fro. Ephesians 4:14. Overly dependent, continual need for instruction. Train up a child in the way that he should go. Proverbs 22:6. You should be teachers and still need to be taught the first principles of the Bible, needing milk, not meat, an unskillful babe. Hebrews 5:12 through 14, 6, 1 and 2. Short-sightedness is another which is detrimental to an adult who is attempting to make long-range decisions for family or church. Immaturity. When I was a child, spoke and thought as a child. When a man, put away childish things. 1 Corinthians 13:11. 1 Corinthians 13 presents a cross-section of arrested development and contrasts it with how we should be. Charity or love in action is synonymous with maturity. It is interesting to note that Paul is correcting the Corinthian church in an effort to bring order out of the chaos caused by the runaway abuse of spiritual gifts. In 1 Corinthians 13:20, he urges them to be childlike in malice, but adults mature in understanding. 1 Corinthians 13:1 exhorts them not to be ignorant, and then explains how the gifts should operate. This chapter also proves that the mere possession of gifts does not make one spiritual or mature. There must be more than the simple manifestation of gifts to demonstrate spiritual maturity. There is an exhortation in Hebrews to move on in Christ and leave the elementary principles behind as maturity is attained. Hebrews 6 points out our need for such growth. Verse 9 discusses greater things which come as one builds on the foundation of salvation. Spirits of arrested development hinder people from understanding eternal salvation and will help to create a terrible fear of losing it. A study of Scripture reveals an exhortation running through the entire New Testament to grow up into perfection, literally, maturity. The Apostle John made a distinction between little children, young men, and fathers. Little children need continual reassurance that their sins had been forgiven. Young men who are more mature have overcome the wicked one. Unless we are engaging the enemy in successful warfare, we are not operating in this second level of growth. John speaks of fathers who know God. Grounded in basic doctrine, they have developed strength by winning victory over the enemy. This produces a deep, abiding fellowship with God. John clearly stresses the difference between little children and young men. Nevertheless, the apostle continues to teach them about the Antichrist, confidence, how to guard against deception, and how to love their fellow believers. An extreme fear of being deceived is another very common manifestation of arrested development and will cause a hesitancy in trying to walk in the Spirit. Confidence in his walk with the Lord will enable a young man to respect the power of the enemy but not walk in fear or terror. Arrested development spirits cloud thinking and produce childish understanding and perception of situations and circumstances. Children must learn the consequences of their actions and learn to shoulder responsibilities for their own actions. This is true in physical relationships and also in the spiritual realm. A case of parental interference occurred when Rebecca conspired with her son to deceive her husband. Then she tried to shield him from the consequences of his actions by sending him to her brother Laban. Her punishment was to never see her beloved son again. Later, the Lord had to bring him to surrender to God. Genesis 27. Solomon said that he was but a child and needed an understanding heart to judge God's people. He asked the Lord for the ability to discern between good and evil. 1 Kings 3, 6 through 12. This must be the plea of every sincere soul who is struggling against the bondage of arrested development. People who are handicapped by this are acutely aware of it just as Solomon was. One of my fervent personal prayers for years was for help to go through the maturation process. The Lord answered by delivering me from a multitude of alcoholic spirits. They had to be forced out before I could honestly face and accept my own immaturity. After deliverance in this area, the Lord kicked me out of the nest in a sense. Deuteronomy 32:11. I was forced into situations in which I had no choice but to grow up. At this point, God revealed the spirits of arrested development. Deliverance continued leading me down many strange trails. It was not pleasant, and I learned all about growing pains. Be sure that you mean business when you ask the Lord to mature you. The process of learning to fly as a young eagle can be frightening, tiring, and painful. However, it is absolutely necessary if you are going to become a soaring eagle for God. Finances was an area of crippling bondage for me. I simply could not lay aside provisions for the future. It was as if I had a hole in my pocket and lived only for the current day. Paradoxically, I was also bound by a deep seated fear of making money. Demons convinced me that this would draw me away from the Lord. Before my deliverance, it would have done exactly that. I first had to be set free from wicked spirits which caused me to handle money as a child would. A mature adult understands enough about the use of money that he does not devote himself to the collection of toys. Unfortunately, many do not quit playing games. They merely buy more expensive toys. In 1 Samuel 18, Saul betrayed Arrested Development by his attitude toward David when people were singing the praises of the shepherd boy. Seething anger, jealousy, murder, childishness, competitiveness, and cruelty are some of the spirits which manifested in King Saul. We have uncovered spirits embedded and hidden in the emotions who began interference with development in their prey as early as the age of 2. Spirits working in the will to stop growth and control came in at the age of 6 or 7. For years, we have known that the spirit called childish self will sits blocking the gate of maturity. Refusal to grow up, rebellion, stubbornness, and pouting are some of the spirits found working under the spirit of arrested will. King Ahab threw a pouting fit when he failed to get what he wanted. 1 Kings 21 1 through 16. Thus he used a childish means of control with Queen Jezebel to manipulate her into seizing the vineyard he coveted. He was the king and could have easily ordered Naboth's execution and seized his property. Instead, he showed his slothfulness and, quote, "get this for me, mommy" attitude. Pouting spirits in children should be dealt with quickly because they open the door for more dangerous demons to enter. On the other hand, there are control spirits which steal away men's masculinity or keep them in a little boy state. This will block them from becoming the protectors and leaders of the family, church, and the nation which God designed them to be. Arrested development of the mind results from the use of drugs and or alcohol. EKG readings taken after the use of marijuana show brain waves typical of a 12-year-old child. Continual habitual use of various drugs can drop the readings even lower. Samson demonstrated his immaturity by refusing godly counsel from his own parents. Spirits of the brute, unteachable, unreprovable, wanted his own way, and lust were all held in place by arrested development. They very obviously manifested in his life. Paul solemnly warned Timothy to flee his youthful lusts. 2 Timothy 2:22. Arrested development leads to extremely undisciplined lives. This gives grounds to bad habits, various lust spirits, no self-control, impatience, short attention span, and an inability to communicate on a mature level to operate. One of my greatest pleasures today is the ability to communicate with my wife. This is the direct result of being freed from demonic bondage. I no longer react childishly to her comments, nor am I constantly driven to have the last word. Previously, it was impossible and out of the question for us to talk and interact as mature individuals because of my dreadful bondage. The demonic family operating under arrested development seems to have been at the root of many of the problems which had fettered and driven me for so many years. These included anger, rebellion, bad habits, etc. Dealing with this group of demons first made freedom come much easier in other areas. If there is difficulty in casting out demons of a particular area, it might be well to check on arrested development. He may well be the hidden power clogging up the deliverance process. The roots of arrested development produce some other poisonous fruits. Look for gossip, lack of self control, malice, active intent to harm others, foolishness, bound up in the heart of a child, immaturity, instability, tossed to and fro, Ephesians 4:14, bad habits, fear. This is a major spirit. Many spirits of fear left both me and my wife as the power of arrested development was broken. These were spirits which had stubbornly resisted being cast out even after years of spiritual battle. Others were intolerance, little boy and little girl spirits, marked by facial appearance and voice tones. Attributes of selfishness, wanting to play all the time, avoidance of people of the same age, jealousy, competition for love, and competition for position. There are several other biblical examples in the New Testament parables which illustrate the principles driving arrested development. The man who built his house on the sand is an example of short-sightedness. Matthew 7:26. The five virgins in Matthew 25, 1 through 13, made no provisions for the future. This speaks of living for today and with little or no financial responsibility and planning for future needs. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14 reflect fear of punishment, immature reaction with investing, fears, and foolishness. Arrested development can manifest in women and cause them to dress inappropriately for their age. Dressing too young and extremes in makeup and hairstyles can make them look ridiculous. Sometimes it seems that the older the woman, the more she paints. Her paint and dyes are more appropriate for a clown. They actually make her look older, emphasize rather than to make her age, to mask her age. Women are also driven to look to their husbands to provide paternal needs, which have not been met during their childhoods by their fathers. This will create an ungodly male/female relationship. This will hinder or prevent the women from ever attaining the godly attributes listed in Proverbs 31. One woman with whom we prayed had a tubal ligation to prevent conception of children. She wanted to have all her husband's love, the love which she failed to receive from her father. Think of all the blessings which this family will never receive. Other spirits operating in these women are passivity, clinging, and over-dependent personality. Having so many of this vicious and powerful family of spirits cast out has brought me tremendous blessing and spiritual advance. Deliverance becomes sweeter and more effective every year that goes by. My family and I are so thankful for the bread of the children casting out evil spirits. Daily we thank the Lord Jesus for this marvelous provision for us and the continuous work he is doing in us. Dyslexia and Related Learning Disabilities by Sharon Mulkey. Our son was conceived, born, and reared with the wonderful knowledge of deliverance. However, we noticed at age 6 he was reversing letters such as P, B, and D, etc., and numbers such as 7 and 3. I had heard about a neurological problem called dyslexia, which caused this and many other symptoms. These include decreased short-term memory, confusion, inability to concentrate, poor memory retention, spaciness, and inability to follow 2- and 3-step instructions. He also had processing difficulties, i.e., what went in did not come out the same. This was coupled with poor coordination and balance. We explained to him what was going on. Then each day before school, he learned to join us in binding the spirits who were at the root of these wrong reactions. Slowly but surely, over the next 6 months, we began to see definite changes and improvements in both his reading and writing. He became an A student without difficulty. Because he actively took part in the binding operation, he learned of his power over the enemy. He also came to understand in a practical way how much Jesus cares for him and his problems. At age 11, he no longer has any problems in these areas. Praise the Lord. We have since learned that inner ear infections can cause much damage to the vestibular. The, cere- the, c- the cerebellar nerve is also involved and is the pathway of all stimuli from the ear to the brain. Recent medical research has shown that even having tubes placed in the ears usually damages these nerves. Once more, we are destroyed by our lack of knowledge, but the Lord Jesus is more than able to heal and restore. He has done it for our son, and more recently for our 6-year-old daughter. Rampant use of drugs, i.e., alcohol, hardline, prescription, and fast food nutrition, have put problems on many of today's children. They enter life invisibly handicapped in their nervous systems. Consequently, they are drugged with Ritalin to counteract hyperactivity or may be classed inappropriately as being slow and stupid, exhibiting an attention deficit syndrome. It is little wonder that Satan so savagely attacks the children. In any and all ways he attempts to hinder and destroy them, battling to prevent their coming to Christ. Mark 16:13 through 16. Children are God's gift from the beginning. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the woman and the children and said, Who are these with thee? And he said, The children which God has graciously given thy servant. Genesis 33:5. God's heritage. Psalm 127, 3 through 5. Crown of age. Proverbs 17:6. They are eligible for all God's promises. Acts 2:39. They can understand the scriptures. 2 Timothy 3:15. Because God has given us the tools, it is our duty as parents to use them to help reclaim our children for Him. Freed from dyslexia woman, 40 years old. My nephew had problems in school for years and was finally diagnosed as being dyslexic. After this happened, I remembered how difficult my own school years were. My sister said that dyslexia runs in families, and my mother remarked that she thought it was a family line curse. I checked on the symptoms in some library books. How shocking to discover what sounded like detailed descriptions of me. Dyslexia is a learning disability believed to be caused by an inner ear disturbance or minimal brain dysfunction. Boys seem to be affected more than girls. As a general rule, females will either be mildly or severely affected. Males, on the other hand, commonly run the gamut from mild to very severe symptoms. It produces difficulty in reading, writing, and spelling, although it will manifest differently in each individual. Victims will do well and succeed in some endeavors, but will have problems in other areas. It really helped me to learn that these people are not stupid, but are average or above average intelligence. Deep in my heart, I had always felt that there was no hope for me. I was just too stupid to learn anything. I would learn something but could not retain it because of a faulty memory. I was never very good at communication with other people. Although I would have things to say, I would be unable to remember them. This was terribly embarrassing, and I decided that I simply did not know how to talk to others. When I came for deliverance prayer from this spirit, a huge monster erupted from deep within me. I had the most violent and heavy deliverance I ever got in the many years I have received prayer. Wrapped up in it were all of the feelings of utter inadequacy and the conviction that I would never be able to do anything right. Arrested development spirits were also working with dyslexia to handicap my life. Following deliverance from dyslexic spirits included self hatred. For the first time, I was able to feel good about myself. I also could communicate my thoughts to other people. It is really a lot of fun getting acquainted with folk after all these years. The reference books also states that allergies sometimes play a part in dyslexia. Sure enough, I had powerful angry spirits also. Agoraphobia, a fear of everything, was mentioned too, And I do remember that I had always had haunting fears of facing the outside world. Out there was a hostile environment filled with nameless terrors and torment. Scripture declares, "Fear hath torment." I had always let my husband do all my thinking for me. Because he was not saved, he exercised a very destructive control spirit over me, and I never questioned nor resisted it. After all, I felt incapable of reasoning and thinking for myself. This will cause a person to become dependent and totally subservient. Poor balance is another symptom of dyslexia. Since I was a child, I always felt clumsy and awkward and would never wear high heels for fear of tripping. Fears related to directional uncertainties are also common symptoms of dyslexia. Friends used to laughingly remark that I would get lost walking out my front door. I had an overwhelming fear of getting lost and not knowing where to go, for I had no sense of direction. I was a terrible speller. I learned that dyslexia can produce mirror vision, causing reversal or skipping of words or letters such as B's, D's, J's, P's, R's, and S's. Sometimes colors are reversed to me. To me, purple is orange and orange is purple. Other symptoms include difficulty of distinguishing between right and left. All of this leads to a lot of confusion, frustration, failure, low self esteem, poor visual perception, and memory for words. There's a dreadful feeling of being ugly because you see yourself in a distorted way. Inferiority, social withdrawal, shyness, and inadequacy are constant companions. Dyslexia manifests itself in hundreds of ways. There can be problems with the sense of timing, which causes difficulty in learning to tell time or to have a sense of time. There may be no concept of time, causing one to be constantly late or very early. Toilet training and bedwetting problems also can be rooted in the dyslexic syndrome. Because of my recent divorce, I am having to make a new life for me and my family. It seems that each week there is an entire set of new problems. The Lord has opened doors for me to return to school for training in the fall. Coping with all of this would have been absolutely impossible before deliverance. Because of my deliverance, I have hope and can work out my problems depending on the Lord Jesus. The information in this booklet has been taken from Pastor Worley's Host of Hell series. Similar information relating to the topic of this booklet may be found in one of the other 11 books he authored. John 9:4. I must work the works of him that sent me, while it is day. The night cometh, when no man can work. That is the end of this reading.